Welcome. Thanks for joining us again. This week here at Grow Time Hydroponics, we'll discuss mixing nutrients, different types of nutrients, pH meters, all that good stuff. This is honestly, in my opinion, the hardest part. Once you understand this and once you settle on a nutrient solution that you know how to use, it becomes much easier. You're just basically repeating the same things over and over, depending on what stage the plant life is, what plants you're growing, things like that. So I'm going to go ahead and just wait a few more moments. Hopefully we'll get some people joining us. If not, this will definitely be recorded as always. We will cover a lot today, so you may need to come back and watch this again anyways. So, hold tight. I'll be right back. Alright guys, I've got my comments. We'll go ahead and get started. So first, a little bit of just basics about nutrient solutions. Everything that we will talk about and that you'll see in our store and maybe even in other gardening stores, you'll start noticing these numbers. Like this one is 795. This one, 324, So all of our nutrient solutions have those three numbers, and you might be wondering, like, is that a coincidence? Like, they all have it, and it's on purpose. It represents the NPK. So just a little bit of basic science before we move forward. N is nitrogen. So that's going to do a couple of different things. That's really important in your green growth stage. It's going to give you very lush, strong plants. It's important in the production of new cells and enzymes. It's responsible for leaf and stem growth, helps plants with rapid growth, and it gives you that the green pigment that you're used to with your herbs and your lettuces and things like that. I mean, and even your plants that will flower later on, they need the nice, strong, healthy roots and stems and greens before they can produce flowers and fruit for you ultimately. The second part to that is P, that's for your phosphorus. So it's going to encourage your root growth and your blooming. So it's a central part of the process of photosynthesis as well. It's involved in the formation of all different types of oils, sugars, starches. So it's very important for your plants. And then it helps with the transition of solar energy to chemical energy. And the third part, which is the K, or potassium, that encourages the uptake of water. It's essential in the development of fruits and flowers. It increases plant resistance to disease, so that's also important. You want it to be nice and strong and make it through a full grow. And then it helps plants make better use of the light in the air. So that means it's ultimately going to take all that energy and better convert it into plants and fruits and things like that. One other really big important thing that you need to know about nutrient solutions is that if you're doing a 2-part or a 3-part solution, or even a more part, and we'll talk about that later, don't ever mix the nutrients together in a cup or a bucket first. You need to have water first, and these need to be going directly into water, so you need to dilute them. What'll happen is if you take all the nutrients and you mix them together without water, they'll basically lock each other out. They won't work. So when you do add water later on, it's not really going to do anything for you. The plants aren't going to get what they need. So make sure you mix it with water first and dilute it. We deal with a 3-part system here in the store. It's called the Flora series by General Hydroponics. It is a basic, a grow, and then it has a micro nutrient and a bloom. And depending on what stage of the plant life and what plant you're growing, that is what tells you how much to mix of each one. So you do have to kind of understand the basics of that. We have charts. So if you were to use one of the Flora series like we do in here, or even the organic version, the BioThrive series, which I'll talk a little bit about, we provide those charts for you. You're welcome to take one home with you. It's also readily available on the internet. The General Hydroponics line is very, very popular. It's, in my opinion, the most popular type of nutrients that you'll find in hydroponics. And that's because it can be used in true hydroponics, recirculating water. It can be used for cocoa. And the reason I say that is because there's another line by General Hydroponics. It's called General Organics. So very similar to the 3-part series that we use and we'll mix up later on today. There's an organic line. that may sound great. A lot of people that do hydroponics want to do organics. The downside is it's not great for your true recirculating hydroponics. It doesn't mix well with the water. It kind of coagulates. And as far as I understand and what I've found on my own, that is true for all organic nutrient solutions. So if you're doing cocoa, like a pour over, like basically replacing the cocoa in the bottom of your pot for dirt, it should work for something like that. You'll want to set up a timer to water or hand water daily. But a recirculating true hydroponic system like we deal with here, organics is not going to be very great for you. So let's go ahead and talk about pH meters. So something that's very, very important in hydroponics is your pH meter. And again, this is something that you maybe have heard when somebody's talking about a pool, like your local swimming pool. The pH has to be right. The same is true for hydroponics. Most plants that we deal with, so like the green leafy herb vegetables, they range from wanting a pH of 5.5 to 6.5, and that means when we get to mixing our nutrient solution, that's where you'll want this tester to show us that our water level is at. If you get into peppers, I know that they can generally stand a higher pH, so they can even go up to like 7. Every plant kind of varies just a little bit, so depending on what you're growing, again, Google is your best friend. It's readily available on the internet. We also have the great DIY book here that has all of the plants in the back of it. It tells you what kind of pH it needs, what type of system it does well, and things like that. So that information is readily available. But when you get your pH meter, you actually have to sync it. And what I mean by that is it will come with a pH buffering solution. And this is, in fact, a 7.0 pH. And what this will do is make sure that your tester, your meter, is reading correctly. What you don't want is it to come out of the box. You don't test it and make sure that it's level or working correctly, and then you're getting an incorrect reading, and then all your plants die. So definitely make sure that you, it's called calibration, so you'll calibrate it. The buffering solution, you can either buy it here. So we have it in the larger jugs. We have 4 as well as 7. But all of our pH meters come with a 7.0 buffer solution. It gives you instructions right on the package about how to calibrate it. And then from there, you'll want to make sure to store it in an electrode storage solution. And that'll just make sure that your readings are always accurate, you're taking care of your materials. So they can get a little bit finicky. So we talked a little bit about pH up and down last week, so in addition to measuring the pH, you might need to adjust it. You can do that with the pH up and down. Instead of a meter, if you want to do it the old school way, these actually come with a bottle and like a little vial that you can put your water in. You put a few drops of your testing fluid in there and it'll turn it a certain color. It'll tell you what the pH is. I prefer, the digital reading just because it's faster, it's more accurate to me, but the old-fashioned way will work just the same. It is also important that you start with good water. So city water around here, especially in Gainesville, not necessarily the best. I don't like drinking the tap water here. I think it tastes gross. But all that stuff that's in that water is also going to get to your plants. So we actually recommend that you filter your water. We did distilled water. So you can get distilled water at the store, buy it in gallon jugs. That kind of becomes costly. You can also distill your own water. You can take rainwater and collect it and let it sit outside, and actually the sun and everything will dissipate the chlorine and bad things that are in it, and you'll get distilled water that way. You can also just take regular water out your sink and set it outside, and again let the light kind of work its way out, and all that bad stuff will dissipate out of there. Or we work with a reverse osmosis filter here. I always encourage anyone that's in need of good water and they want to see the difference, bring us a jug. I'll fill it up for you just so you can see. We have things like water filters, so this would hook right onto your sink or your hose or whatever you're using. And then similarly, if you have a filter at home, that would also work. Just be mindful of the temperature. A lot of times the water filters have colder temperatures of water in it. You don't want to shock your plants or anything like that, so maybe let it sit out and get room temperature before you add it to your plants. So I've got some distilled water right here behind me in the bucket. In between talking about some of the stuff here that I have with me, I'm going to mix. And the reason I say that is because you actually have to mix a part and you have to let it sit, and you mix a part and you let it sit, and that's important to make sure that everything is just mixing correctly and that your plants have great nutrient uptake when you know, we put it into the reservoir. So let's go ahead and start with that. So before we add our 3-part Flora series, which I have right here, I deal with also Hydroguard here. I talked a little bit about it last week. I like to think about this in the terms of like a probiotic, like for your stomach. So it basically creates good bacteria for your hydroponic system or for your plants. It's going to help keep the algae out, help keep all the bad, you know, things out of your plants that you don't want. A lot of times if you have water, especially if it's sitting still and you have, you know, light exposed to that or things like that, you'll get algae. It'll start stinking. It's not good for your plants either. So Hydroguard, I definitely recommend this. I add it to every single full nutrient fill up from beginning to end from the time their seedlings on, and it just really helps keep my plants healthy. So the important thing to note is that you actually have to start with this. So when you're measuring it out, all the instructions are on the back of every single bottle that you get from us, in addition to the charts that we give you. But so this one is basically 2 milliliters for every gallon, and there's a few ways you can measure that. I just have a little syringe, a little 20 milliliter syringe, but I mean they go all the way up to 150 milliliters, so you can kind of pick and choose. We also have these cute little shot glasses here, and they measure ounces, tablespoons, milliliters, all that good stuff. So if you aren't sure, you don't have a syringe, something like this would work. So I prefer the syringe. Actually, before I open it, that's a good point as well. Everything that you do with, you want to shake, you want to make sure that it's nice and mixed up before you actually open it. So we'll get that open. I have 4 gallons of water behind me. Unless I'm doing a full, you know, swap and clean of my system, which we'll talk about next week, I always do a 5-gallon bucket and I put 4 gallons of water in it. That way I can move it around. It's not too heavy for me, and it fits really well in a 5-gallon bucket. So we'll start there. So that means I need 8 milliliters of this. We put that in. I have a paint mixing stick. You can kind of use whatever. For a while I was using like chopsticks. You can use a spoon, whatever you want, but the point is from here you just want to mix it. And we'll let that sit for just a second. I'll go ahead and put my Hydroguard up from here. So I've dipped this syringe into my bottle. So a really important thing about your nutrients is you don't want to mix these, like I talked about that in the very beginning, and that even pertains in this aspect of it. So in between each of these, I usually keep just little cups of water, and I just kind of rinse everything out. I'm going to use a new cup each time. The way to avoid that is, like I said, like if you pour it into the glasses and you kind of do it from there, then you're not mixing anything, you're just kind of dumping at that point. So that's another option. So I've mixed that out, we've let that sit. Before we move on, I'd mention that you don't really want to use your tap water. It's not to say that you can't. I've seen people do it and get results that are just fine. It's just not great for your plants. You want to give them every opportunity to flourish. But let's say you don't have access to a filter, or it's just, you know, it's just not an option for you. We also have a Hardwater version of our Flora series. So it's basically the Flora Micro, which I will add next. And instead of using the regular Micro, you can use the Hardwater, and that'll just kind of cancel out all the bad stuff that's in your water. So that is an option. But preferably, just go ahead and filter out your water. Alright, so the other thing that I normally deal with, which I'm not going to add today because I'm making a general purpose solution, but if you were to mix this for something that's fruiting or flowering, you probably want to add a CalMag supplement. So this is calcium, magnesium, and iron, and it just adds a little bit of extra help when you're using a recirculating hydroponic system or cocoa, especially if you're using reverse osmosis water like we do, because it basically strips everything out of the water, so you have like nothing to start on. So CalMag is good for your fruiting and your flowering plants, not necessary for your green stuff, which is, I'm doing a general purpose mix, so I'm going to leave it out, but very important in the world of hydroponics is the CalMag. So, since we're not doing CalMag, the next thing that we would do is move on to our Flora series. So it's a 3-part. It's important to always start with the micro first. I don't know why. I just follow the directions and what people tell me because I want to make sure that my plants live. So again, you want to shake it. For a general purpose mix, it's easy to see on the back of here. It might be backwards because of my camera, but basically it gives you different ways to mix this up. And what I mean by that is you could do a very weak solution for seedlings and cutlings when they're very small. They don't need quite as much. It might actually harm them if you give them too much early on. They could get what's called nutrient burn, make it hard for them to grow bigger. There's a general purpose or a mild vegetative mix, which is for all of your green leaves, herbs, things like that, which is what I'm going to do today. I'm going to add it to our vertical tower up front just to give it a little bit of extra. There's also an aggressive vegetative growth, and at that point you basically double everything that you're adding, and then you add a little bit more of the grow, which I'll talk about the grow soon. There's a transition to bloom, so as you have plants like tomatoes and peppers and things like that that will want to flower and turn into fruit, you'll want to get a little bit more aggressive. You want to feed them just a little bit more. Same with the blooming and the ripening. That's when you'll see your bloom portion, which I always add last. That's when you'll see that ramp up and you'll put less of the grow in. So for today we're doing a mild vegetative, so that is basically, it's really easy. It's a 1 part, 1 part, 1 part. And by 1 part I mean 5 milliliters per gallon. So we have 4 gallons. So it is essentially just one of these. So it's 20 milliliters, right? So I shook that up. Measure out our 20 milliliters. Drop that in. I've got my new water. I'm going to set that there while I'm mixing. Alright, so we'll let that sit just for a little bit. We'll talk about a few other things, and then we'll add the other parts, which is the grow and the bloom. So the micro actually gives nitrogen, potassium, calcium, micronutrients, and trace elements. Some people ask me, like, with this, is it important that you use all 3? Yes, you must use all 3 every single time. What is even more important is the ratio at which you mix them at. Not all nutrients are 3 parts. We'll talk about some 1 parts and some 2 parts soon. This one is just generally the most versatile. We like it. We use it for every single thing in here. So before we add our grow and our bloom, we're still letting that sit. Let's talk about a few other additives. Similar to the CalMag that I showed you over there, which is by another brand, Botanicare. This is Cali Magic, so this is the general hydroponics version. It is the same thing. It's just a different name by it. You have your Armor C. This is another really popular additive. This is going to give just enhanced growth of your roots. Make sure that it has extra silica and potassium. Silica is going to give your plants a better chance to survive in harsh environments. Which brings me to this. It is a silica blast, and this is exactly what I just talked about. It helps strengthen the plant tissue. It helps plants flourish in adverse environments, conditions such as heat, drought, frost. You can use in soilless or in soil, so even if you're not doing straight hydroponics, the silica blast is super important to a strong, healthy, long growing plant. Alright, let's go ahead. I usually do grow next. It doesn't have to be. You can do bloom or grow in whatever way that you would like to. But I just do grow next. I don't know why. But better to make a habit. That way if you don't get out of your routine and mess something up just not thinking about it. So let me clean this guy off. Again, if we were doing a more aggressive feed, we'd probably do more than 20 milliliters, but I am just doing a very general. And while we let that sit, I have a few more to talk about. We'll do that soon. So we talked a little bit about these last week, and we'll talk more in depth about them next week, but it's basically nutrients for your system. So it doesn't add any, nutrients for the plants, but it is a supplement that you can add to your system to help clean it out. If you're mixing this into your nutrients, you actually want to do it first before you start mixing everything else. You can do it with multiple grows. I actually recommend that you do it when you're doing like a full clean out of your system or right before you're about to harvest your plants. Not really necessary, but if you start using pumps and reservoirs and things like that, what you might see is like a salt buildup. It might start getting hard for your pumps to run, and you just want to take care of things. You want to make them last, and this is one of the ways to do that. There is things such as a 1-part solution, and by 1 part I mean this would only be good if you were growing plants that weren't flowering or fruiting. This is a Dyna-Gro. There's also Dyna-Gro Bloom. But let's say we're only doing lettuce or herbs or something like that. It would be okay to just use this 1 bottle. It's a little bit easier. You only use 2 to 3 teaspoons per gallon, and that is easily measurable in something like that, or even just, a teaspoon. So keep in mind the type of plant you're growing. If it's just green, you could use just a 1 part. Another really popular one is the Pure Blend Pro. So this is a 2-part system. You have the Pro Grow. So you'll add this in the first 3 or 4 weeks of a plant's life, as long as it's a vegetative growth only. Let's say, again, you are only doing vegetative, you could use this as a 1-part solution. But if you're doing tomatoes or peppers or something that'll flower, you'd want to switch over when they're trying to get them to bloom to the Bloom. And I'm showing you both of these because they're the same type. They're the Pure Blend Pro, but one's for soil and one's for hydroponics. They just, one works better in soil and one works better in hydroponics, but they're both for the blooming. And at that point, you would stop using the Grow. So how this one works is you don't mix all of them together for the first 4 or 5 weeks of the plant's life. You use the Grow. Once you're ready to transition to the Bloom, you switch to the Bloom. And all of it's on the back, so it's super easy to read up about it. You can find it online pretty easily, or we're happy to talk to you about it, so don't be shy. We have another 2-part solution from General Hydroponics. It's the Flora Nova series. This one I do like. It's only a 2-part, and basically if you're only doing the Grow, you can use this, and you're only doing the Bloom, you use this, so you don't have to mix them together. The weird thing about it is it's super dense. So you'll see these stickers on the top, and it's very important that you shake these vigorously every time. Like, I'm not talking about for 30 seconds, I'm talking about a couple minutes. You gotta sit here and shake it and make sure it's all together, otherwise it will coagulate, and your nutrients won't get taken up by the roots as well. But this is, another option. If you don't want to mix all 3 every time and you just want to, one and done, you would do Grow, and then when you're ready, switch to the Bloom. Now, some people do not like liquid. They just don't want to deal with it. They would rather deal with a powder or, something like that. So in that case, General Hydroponics does make this dry, which is your Maxi Grow and your Maxi Bloom. So it has like a little measuring spoon right inside of there. You know what? This is actually a favorite of some of our local industrial growers. So the guys that's what they do for a living, and they come in and they want to do, they're growing on their side, their stuff that they're not doing at work every day. This is actually a favorite of theirs. If it tells you what type of quality that it is a little bit easier to control, in my opinion, versus the liquid. All right, so let's go ahead and finish up with our Bloom. So we mixed so far the Hydroguard, we mixed our Micro and our Grow, so we'll do the Bloom. It's last. It's again just a 20 milliliter at this point. We'll let that sit, and then we will test the pH very, very soon. I don't think I have any comments. I was kind of checking. I don't have my laptop today, so I'm on my phone only. But if you guys need anything or have any questions, let me know. So while that is getting ready, let's see. I've talked about pretty much everything. I only touched on the general organics box just a little bit. This box is really neat if you are into organics and you don't really care that you're doing like a cocoa grow or something. And I really like this because it's got all these little tiny like sample bottles, and they're not necessarily sample bottles. Think about it, we only added 20 milliliters to that 4 gallons. So if you're just doing a small time grow, this actually will last you. The reason I like this box is that it gives you all of the different general organics lines. So it gives you the Bio Thrive Grow and Bloom, so it's a 2-part system. The calcium and magnesium, like we talked about. There is a specific one for organics versus non-organics. The Bio Root, the Bio Weed, Bio Bud, Marine Bio, and the Diamond Black. So they all have different additives and reasons why you should add them. Some, range from stronger roots to stronger leaves to stronger, any type of bud you might get. The Bio Marine actually has squid protein in it, so actual marine kind of waste and stuff, and it's good for all different kinds of things, your stems, foliage, flowers. But this box actually gives you details about every single one. It allows you to kind of experiment and find out what works well for you, what do you need, what do you don't need. So that's why I like these little starter ones. They're pretty neat. We also have the Rapid Start. This is something that is a local favorite. We have the big cans, but also the small cans. It basically allows you to propagate your plants, take cutlings off of a plant and grow roots right off of it and have a new plant. Something else that's really important in mixing your nutrients is hydrogen peroxide. We talked about this recently as well. It's food grade hydrogen peroxide. You should not be using the stuff off of the shelf at CVS or Walgreens or whatever. It has additives in it that make it shelf stable, and at that point it has things that are not necessarily good for your plant. So use food grade, and this is actually very concentrated. So you mix this 1 part peroxide to 12 parts water. So this will give you a lot more than this little tiny bottle here. But that'll kill your algae and any kind of nastiness in your water. It'll keep things fresh and healthy. So if for some reason your water doesn't turn out as planned in your system and you get that algae in there, you'll want to kind of cut it back and maintain it the best that you can. Alright, so we have our pH meter. Let's go ahead and test it. So I'm sitting at a 5.7 without touching anything. That should happen with the mixture that we're using. And since I'm using it for general purpose herbs and lettuce, I'm actually not going to adjust the pH. If I had put in more of the bloom, let's say like for the peppers for instance, they're already blooming and giving us fruit and flowering, so we have to add a little bit more of the bloom version. What I've noticed what that does is it drops the pH. So at that point, I take my pH up and I slowly add it to the mixture until it comes up. The point to make there is that you want to give it a while, just like I did here, and I kind of talked in between and I let it sit. You'll want to do the same thing for your pH, because if you dump it in there and you immediately test it, you're not going to get a true reading. And that could be bad. That could mean that you actually take your water and put it into your reservoir and it's way too high and it just shocks all your plants and they die. I've seen it happen, unfortunately. So when you're adjusting your pH, rule of thumb, do the smallest amount possible, sit, let it mix, be patient, be kind, and measure once. You don't want to hurt your plants. It's no fun. You also have a EC and a TDS meter. For this purpose, for what you guys are trying to do, I don't know that that's as important. I'm not going to say that it's not important. It measures the uptake or even the parts per million, so how much stuff is in the water that you're dealing with. If you get too much, it could just harm the uptake of the nutrients in your plant, or you could have what's called nutrient lockout, which just means the roots don't suck anything up. They just basically go on strike and they're done. So if you start to have problems with your plants, if you're using a pre-mixed nutrient solution and you're distilling your water, or you have reverse osmosis water, and you're doing what you're supposed to, you shouldn't have the need for an EC or parts per million or TDS, in my opinion. But that's not to say that you shouldn't make it a good practice, learn about it, and go ahead and get one. They're relatively cheap, you know, just in case. So I don't think that I have any comments. That is actually all I have for today. So I'm going to leave it open just a few more minutes, see if anyone has anything to say or anyone wants to, you know, ask a question. If not, we're always here. Email us, ordering at growtimehydroponics.com or growtimehydro.com. You can at growtimehydro.com is another one that you can kind of just get info from. Our phone number, I don't know that off the top of my head. Hold on. So our phone number is 352-554-5687. You can visit our website, growtimehydro.com. You can come and see us. We are in the Millhopper Plaza in Gainesville, Florida, next to the world famous Leonardo's Pizza. Stop in and get some, you know, garlic knots. They are delicious. You can't go wrong there. So we'd love to see you. Love to hear from you, and thanks for joining us.